Australia took a lot of survivors, and the whole Jewish Museum foundation was based upon survivors.
We were talking yesterday how the survivors who hid, like Barry's character, felt once the war ended versus how the officially liberated survivors felt, and the levels of trauma, the levels of nightmares, the levels of whether one has been resolved marginally more than another, like how he would feel when that door is opened to the attic and the powerlessness.
And he actually gets to walk out. And he does talk about, in the text, he talks about how I'm a coward. I should have been out there fighting. But what is discussed is that he comes out knowing that he's just a single man in a very broken world.
But does he feel guilty about his survival?
Absolutely. I think when exploring the character, I think he really does it. I think he feels very guilty and at the same time powerless, because he's stuck in the bounds of this attic. He can't get out. He's got only one link with the outside world, and that is the voice of this woman that he hasn't seen, who's actually a gentle person, who's actually talking to him with some kind of care. But even at the end, he still can't quite forgive her because of the betrayal.
I've lied to you. I've kept you a prisoner longer than is necessary for our survival versus your physical freedom.
Did you do that for his sake or for your sake?
Oh, we just got to that scene today, and it was too scary to really answer.
One of the interesting things that I find from the text is that the Jew, Daniel Blickman, he seems to be unaware of what's happened to everyone else.
He may have been in hiding for 6 years.
And that,
he has been in hiding.
And is that plausible, that he would have been able to not know the details of those camps, do you think?
It's quite feasible. If this was a series of hiding places that he's been in, or even in the forests where he might have been, he wouldn't have been exposed to any of the news of what was going on, other than if he's caught, he's dead.
There is a scene, and we haven't got to it yet, where you're leaving, and I'm trying to say you're going to see images, you're going to walk past piles of bodies. Please don't assume we were all like that. And she asks for forgiveness.
There's a known fact that when General Eisenhower, who then became President Eisenhower a little later, when he was the leader of the Allied forces and he came across these camps, he made the citizens from the nearest towns come and witness what was said. He made photographers take photographs and say that in 50 years' time, people will not believe this depravity that's taken place here. We want you to witness this for the future.
Whereas you guys have had some kind of a conversation about that.
The neighbours walked to it.
And the neighbour's been one of those people who've been taken and shown.
My character, the neighbour, I would imagine has been a very patriotic German all her life. Her husband, upstanding, you know, they're country folk, but they do everything that they're told, stay by the law. And as a result, he was promoted to a district administrator. At the time of this was going to Berlin and listening to Hitler. And so the wife, who has always just been a wife, is proud through her husband, but she's left on her own to fend. Just how far did the civilians go, just not out of any malicious intent, but simply for their own survival?
Yes. Where we find ourselves at this point in the play is right at the very end of the war. So the man that I'm playing is, he and his wife are essentially keeping captive this Jew in the attic, and they end up sort of having a symbiotic relationship where I justify keeping him up there because we're all making money, we're all getting food, and so I'm keeping him alive, you know. So I feel that it's not a terrible thing that I'm doing to him. So there's this kind of weird moral gymnastics that my character is playing with himself to kind of justify what he's doing. For me, what's interesting is to see what life was like as a German man who wasn't necessarily involved in the Nazi Party. I was involved in the local defence.
You would call him apolitical, though. You know,
an apolitical person. And I'm finding it interesting exploring what the mentality was by this point in the war, where everyone's fatigued, everyone's exhausted, everyone's starving, and everyone's sick of it, and everyone also is not necessarily really believing what they're being told by the government anymore. They're starting to realise that it's all propaganda. My character is able to justify the morality of it by thinking, otherwise this Jewish guy would have been killed, you know. So I'm keeping him alive. But really...
But are you doing it for his sake or for your sake?
Well, for both our sakes, whether you're Jewish or German, is that survival instinct is so huge that you'll do anything to stay alive, even if it's a meagre, terrible existence that you're trying to stay in. When a group of people have been dehumanised to such an extent, people don't even think, bystanders don't even think to ask.
If you see people who do try to say something being kicked until they're barely breathing, you don't think, oh, I think I'll say something now.
Well, at the Jewish Museum, which is where I do some guiding, our audience is really students and school children. And I sometimes say to them, talking about bystanders, would you, if you saw at a train station, say 5 young boys bullying a young girl, would you walk away? Could you walk away? And so if they walk out of the museum with a feeling of not being a bystander, I think we will have achieved some results.